friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Good morning, Smokestack. Come in. Have seat.
Oh, hey, thanks, number 12. Wow, that's a nice office you've got here.
Yes, very nice. Good view of hardware store. Mid-morning, many people come. So nice.
Yeah, I bet. So what did you want to see me about today? I'm not in trouble or anything. I think I've been doing my job pretty well.
Oh, no, niet. Your work very good. Most successful clone in many year. We have a good number, quarterly number of Society Patriots Mystical. Very good. All fine.
Whew, okay. Well, that's good to hear. You had me a little worried with that email you sent earlier.
Yes, well, I cut to this chase. Yes? We is having many problems with Angela and human resources. She has become, liability.
Oh, wow. Okay, that sucks, man. What, is she not showing up on time? She's not doing her work? What's going on?
Yet. We have reason to believe Angela is Illuminati plant pushing great reset on noble American people.
What? Really? I can't imagine. I mean, she's always been great to me in the break room. I accidentally ate her blueberry Yoplait once, and she didn't even get mad about it. Illuminati, really?
Da. We have on spy camera observed many time after hour her attempting to send locations of maps bases to Jesuits. At one point, trying to transmit encryption keys of Sumo Starship. She no succeed. Our cryptography is strong, like Great American Union. But she try. Angela, liability must be dealt with.
Wow. Okay. Okay, look, I knew what I was getting into when I signed on. I mean, I don't relish the thought of killing someone, but if it's for the good of the society to save America from the Illuminati, I can do it. Just leave it to me.
Kill? No, niet. We are not yet prepared for that. I need you rather do something much more important. I need you make PowerPoint.
PowerPoint?
Da. PowerPoint presentation of situation for board members of society. Number 15, CEO will be here on Monday. Need ready by then.
You want me to make a presentation about a spy in the company?
Da. Will be very good. Will make many important helps in committee deciding what do about spy.
So this is just a committee of the board to decide what to do about the Illuminati spy instead of doing something about the Illuminati spy?
Yet, no. This committee to investigate forming committee must go through proper channels, you understand. Things very fluid right now with society restructuring.
Okay, so I'm supposed to make a presentation for the board about how we should form a committee to investigate forming a committee to see what we might at some point in the future do about an Illuminati spy trying to send our data to the Jesuits.
Precisely. This is why I knew you were best clone for job. Very good.
Okay. So, isn't isn't Angela actually on the board?
You must use very much tact to make sure she not catch on. Otherwise, maybe she files suit for wrongful assassination. And we have mini lawyer bill come summer. Has happened before. Still settlement talks for Anna Nicole Smith. Very messy. Avoid.
Okay, so I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this, or really even what the job is.
Yes, but must not mess up. Other clones mess up before, and structured resettlement in biological vat. Yes?
Oh, okay. Well, right. I guess I'm gonna get right on that.
And Mr. Smokestack?
Oh, yeah.
One more thing. After this over, there'll be maybe a promotion in for you.
Really? You mean I could finally be assistant regional clone?
Well, assisted to the regional clone.
Ah, okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you okay? You sound a little frazzled. Is everything all right?
I sound frazzled?
Yeah, you sounded like a little frazzled. Is everything there?
Oh,
there
I mean,
at the office?
I just had a weird meeting with number 12, but you know.
Oh, really?
We
I
don't
haven't
need to
seen
talk.
number 12 in a while. He spends most of his time in the Moscow department.
Yeah, he's doing well. You know, I think his family's doing good. He's got a really nice office.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. We have a lot of people think that because of the name, the Mystical American Patriot Society, that we only have bases in America under the Yellowstone caldera, but that's not true.
No, they're all over the place. Yeah.
We have the one in Siberia.
Mm-hmm.
We have the one near Victoria Falls in Africa.
Yep.
Obviously. And we have the Antarctica base and the one in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
Which the people down there always are very insistent that you pronounce it Chile and not Chile.
Right. Yeah, they're a little fussy about that, but
they get fussy about that. Yeah.
They've been through a lot. You know, it's understandable.
They have. You know, I figured out today that I've perfected an ancient Native American technique, further giving me evidence, despite perhaps DNA analysis, which some would argue would be greater evidence. But I consider this greater evidence that I am actually strongly Native American. I assume probably Hopi Indian, but I'm not 100% on which one.
Okay.
And that is that I have perfected the art of drinking exactly the amount of fluid necessary before bed so that you wake up needing to pee precisely on the moment you intended.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah, I did it. I've done it the past 5 days in a row.
So you didn't use an alarm clock? Your bladder is the alarm clock?
I have an alarm clock backup,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't need to because today I woke up at 1 minute precisely before I intended to set the alarm.
That's impressive considering how early we do this show.
I know, and then I have done that for getting up just for the regular day for the past week, and you just got to figure out like how much fluid you need per hour basically,
mm-hmm.
and you drink that, and then you wake up around. This is how people used to get up before alarm clocks. People always ask, how'd they figure out how to get up? Well, you just drink enough water.
Wow. So are you measuring your water that you drink?
No, it's all just by feel.
Intuition.
It's just intuition.
You
like the Native Americans.
Know your body.
You know, I don't put a sight on my bow and arrow because I also do instinctive shooting, like my ancestors who hunted the buffalo. And so I do instinctive water intake.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I mean, it was instinctive iced tea intake.
Okay.
Same thing.
Yeah.
That's what the Native Americans also used.
Sure they did.
A lot of people don't know they had green tea first.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. But today we're going to talk about lots of stuff. We're going to discuss how we steal the culture.
Sweet.
Why most people's jobs are pointless and don't matter.
Okay.
Like in the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
And about debt. And I think all these things are related.
I
think all these things are 100% related. We're going to talk about a little book. Have you read the book Debt: A 5,000 Year History?
No.
It's a good book. It's by David Graeber. He's dead now, sadly. He died last year. Not of COVID. He died of pancreatitis. And even if his wiki claimed he died of COVID, I would sit on here and tell you he did not die of COVID. Which I would also do to someone that was currently dying of COVID. If they were in the hospital, I'd say, you're not dying of COVID.
You're dying of a secondary infection of fungus.
You're dying of something else, right? Yeah. So he couldn't have a funeral because of the COVID that isn't real.
Wow.
So his family instead live streamed an intergalactic memorial carnival.
What?
Quote unquote, instead, as you do. I don't know. When people don't have a traditional religious structure to do something, they just start inventing wild things. Like live streaming an intergalactic memorial carnival.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and leave a note to my family in the future and say that if you guys live stream an intergalactic carnival when I die, I'm going to haunt the crap out of you.
Yeah, that's the problem we had around the base there for a while because we did that with the last 3 clones.
Yeah.
That's why there's so much haywire with the electronics.
Right, it gets a little spooky around here sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's worse for you because you're being haunted by versions of yourself in the past.
Yeah, that's weird.
Which makes it meta on top of being haunted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But before we go into all that, I wanted to discuss a little thing that happened 10 years ago now that just came back to my knowledge, and I hadn't checked in on it. Are you familiar with the board X? From 4chan?
Oh, yeah. Okay. X.
Yeah.
Got it.
X is the paranormal board on 4chan, and they talk about things. And this was something that happened in 2011. And I remember it happening, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then I didn't follow up on it at all. And so I didn't know what happened. And then for some reason, it just popped up on my feed like someone was talking about it. I was like, oh, yeah, that thing. I wonder how that went. So I looked into it, did my research, and I'm going to share it with you.
Awesome.
I think this is a good, I don't know. This is either a good case study in how conspiracies can be self-generating, or it's a demon caught on camera.
Sweet.
One of the two. I doubt the second one.
Okay.
But could be. So this was a thing that happened in 2011, and X is the forum of 4chan that talks about paranormal stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't. Do you remember when Google Street View first got started?
Yeah.
Was it before? Was it around this time, or was it before?
We were in college,
and they started rolling out Street View.
Yeah, I remember because the neighbors put a giant sign on top of the house that said "I love poop," and that ended up on Google Street View for a while.
Right. Everyone was trying to. It was like Instagram before Instagram.
Yep.
And you couldn't control what the pictures have. You just had to frame your house in such a way that it would make an interesting photo when the cars went by.
Yep.
So the Google Street View thing was sort of new still, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people would make a hobby of getting on the Street View and just going down the street and looking at all the stuff the Google camera had caught, right?
Right.
Well, so someone was doing this, and they posted a picture of it. Actually, in 2010 was when it was first posted. And it was the address was, and you can still go there, listener, if you would like to, on the computer, 8 Rue Docteur Grandjean of 54,000 Nancy, France, which I think is the French version of saying nice France.
Nice?
Nice, yeah, nice. Whatever.
8 Rue Docteur. I'm writing this down so I can put this up in the
show
notes.
So 8, the number 8,
mm-hmm.
and then space Rue, R-U-E,
mm-hmm.
space Docteur, D-O-C-T-E-U-R, space Grandjean, G-R-A-N-D-J-E-A-N. And as you note, my French is very good.
Yeah, it's impeccable.
It's impeccable, and that's 54,000, so 54000, Nancy, France, N-A-N-C-Y. So my French is as good as my Russian.
Got it.
as you see. So anyway, they said, so someone posted this and said, zoom in on the balcony with the bike, and there is a house there. It looks to be, it's a house of some kind, and there's a bike, and on the balcony is a very strange figure. It's this sort of very skinny. It's gray. It's got one hand sort of cocked on its hip. The other appears to be sort of up at its mouth, as if it is smoking maybe a cigarette, holding a cigarette. And its head is a large, gray, malformed head with glowing red eyes.
Ooh.
And it looks like it has like blonde hair falling off its back. Maybe. And so people were like, that's interesting. What is that? You know, is it some sort of Halloween decoration, this and that? Now, people noted that France doesn't really do Halloween in the same way that they do in America, so that didn't make sense. And then they were like, well, maybe it's some sort of, like, prop for something, and, you know, like a movie prop. And that, I mean, it could be, but it's in the middle of nowhere in a not Hollywood area. And so people would go argue back and forth about, like, what is this thing? But then in 2011, it really took off. Like, people just sort of on X got together and said, let's all view this at one time and figure out what it is. And so they all go there, and they're all looking at it, and everyone's proffering different explanations, like, oh, it's just a this, it's just a that. Someone said, oh, it's an alien, as you do. Some said it's some sort of demon caught on camera that lives in this haunted house. And that would have been the end of it, right? Except that during this collective joint investigation, Google decided that they would blur out that figure while we were talking about it.
Ooh.
So people started refreshing the page, and they noticed that that figure was blurred. Like, it was just gone. Yeah. So that was they just, like, someone had taken Microsoft Paint and sort of smudged all the pixels.
Whoa.
And then put that up there. People were like, people started freaking out, right? Like, what the, like, this is, we've on to something. What is it? We don't know, right? And then, so initially people thought, well, Google has algorithms, because they do. If it detects a naked body, to blur it out.
Okay.
Because if they come across a naked homeless person in the street, they'll blur that out so it's not on your street view.
Right.
However, this had been on there for years until we started en masse talking about it. And then, only then was it blurred out. So that didn't also fit. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, this sort of generated some hype, and everyone came there and looked at it some more. And then it got more blurred. Then the whole balcony was blurred.
Oh.
And people have, you can find these pictures of this progressive blurring of you can see the original, and then blur 1, blur 2, is blurred 3 times. And then people start freaking out about that. A little bit later, the whole top floor is blurred. And as it sits at this point, 10 years later, that entire house from every angle is blurred on every side. I've seen military installations less censored.
Wow.
I'm good. This is this whole, like, every side, you can go on every street view, and everything is just completely, it's just a big smudge of pixels. And so obviously that seems suspicious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, this is the most likely explanation to me. People say, well, in Europe, they have different privacy laws. And some guy that lived there noticed a lot of people poking at his address on the internet. And he contacted Google and said, you must remove. And so they did. And that sort of makes sense, except that if that were the case, every address in Europe would be invisible. Because Europeans are very finicky.
Mm-hmm.
And if they could call Google or fill out a form and say, my address is blurred now, everything would be blurred forever.
Right.
And it isn't. The first one. Second of all, I don't think that, this was when Street View was still pretty new. I don't think that it had been regulated. I don't think the courts of Europe had decided what the legal status of it was at this point. Could be wrong about that.
Okay.
But I don't know that there was a process for asking for your house to be blurred.
Probably not.
Point.
That was the Wild West back then, man.
Right. So I don't know that fits there either. The third thing is, how would this guy know that a bunch of, people on like a bestiality enthusiast board were talking about his house?
Maybe he's a chanter, dude.
He could have been, but it was all in English. He'd have to be. I mean, it seems very unlikely. And then the thing to do, if he was a chanter, he would then mess with you and he'd have more pictures of it where it was creepier.
Yeah, true.
He wouldn't be free, so that doesn't make sense. And then the other thing is, it's still blurred to this day, and it's been 10 years. The whole thing is still blurred.
Wow.
You can go there right now, and the whole thing is censored, like as if all the government secrets are in this house, and they don't. Which obviously makes it more conspicuous, because otherwise you just had this weird figure you said could have been like some sort of movie prop, or Halloween decoration on the balcony, and now the whole thing is blurred out from top to bottom.
So why hasn't some intrepid chanter just gone out there and cased the place?
Because it's in France, and that species does not live in France.
Ah, come on.
Is my first explanation. I don't know. But the second one is, there was someone, the official explanation is that this is a tiki surfboard holder. This is, what it is it's some sort of weird troll figure that has been made, and it's in that particular stance because it's made to prop a surfboard up against.
Okay.
Not a lot of surfing, to my knowledge, going on in this area, but whatever, right? And there was a picture delivered to the public of a figure that looks like this figure propped up in the corner, and they said, yeah, this is a thing. It holds surfboards. It was, never shown holding a surfboard, but whatever.
Okay.
But then, so that's where it lies. They said, oh, it was a surfboard holder, and the guy got freaked out about it. And then he asked Google to censor his whole house, and they did. And that's the end of it. But as I say, censoring the entire house, why does this? Because the claim was this thing was expensive and he was afraid people would steal it. Which, one, it's not expensive. It looks like garbage.
Or a demon.
Or a demon. It doesn't look like something you would want to purchase.
Okay.
Two, why censor the whole house in every direction? This is one of the few cases I've seen where people just censor an entire house from every angle. You don't encounter that often, and I don't know why you would do it for sure. I mean, someone else may live there now. I don't. That's a big to do for just blurring out an entire section of real estate.
Yeah.
Because of a tiki surfboard holder.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's what they think it is. Now, the person that showed this up on my newsfeed was saying that that was obviously not what it was, because they wouldn't do that for a tiki surfboard holder. I think it does look like a tiki surfboard holder, perhaps, but maybe it's a demon caught on camera that the people at Google worship, and they didn't want you to see it.
I think that's probably what it is.
I don't know, but go there on your Google machine and see if you can see anything for yourself, because it's been 10 years and they're still we have to protect this tiki torture surfboard holder. Which is a bit extreme to me.
Yeah.
So something is going on there. It seems like they're doing a little something more. Maybe that's a prominent politician's house or something, and he has some influence, and he really didn't want it on there. I don't know. He didn't want people seeing his idol that he worships.
Maybe one of the members of the family that lives there is horribly deformed, and they just wanted privacy.
Well, if it's deformed that much, it is a demon. I mean, that's a big deformity. Like, if your eyes are glowing red, if you have a deformity where your eyes glow red, I just think you're possessed.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, what? Well, I just have Down syndrome. Like, but your eyes are glowing red, and your head you have fangs. Yeah, rare form of Down syndrome. It just doesn't track. And plus, Down syndrome people are usually very nice and not demonic. So, I don't know. But I just thought I'd fill you up. I went back and I looked at what happened with that case, and I'm going to still stamp it as open. It's still an open case because the explanation makes sense. It's some sort of tiki board surfer, but the reaction doesn't make sense. And there's something else there. It may be as simple as this is the house of someone that maybe works at Google and they really didn't want people seeing their weird. Maybe that's what it is. But there's some other element like why this whole house is blurred in every angle from top to bottom. It's a bit strange. It's a bit like there was that instance where people were reporting UFOs over Ohio, I think, in 20 something 12.
Okay.
2013.
Yep.
And people then went for like Google satellite view because they found out for some reason that it was happening during the same time they were taking the satellite photos of that, and that whole section was unavailable.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's strange. It's very similar to that. I don't know, that whole section of the sky, the satellite, it was unavailable. And you pan over, and then it had a normal picture, and then you pan back, and then a few weeks later they replaced it with something else.
As you were talking, I did pull up the 8 Rue Docteur Grandjean photo, and it is very strange. I was expecting like, it's gonna be blurry and like you're not sure what it is. It's like, no, it's like a goblin woman standing there.
Yeah, it's like a goblin woman on the balcony.
Yeah, it's just staring straight at the camera.
Just staring like, yeah, you caught me.
Yeah,
Google, you must blur, Satan.
It's pretty crazy looking.
Do not let the plebs see that Satan lives here. Because I guess the goblin lady wanted to get some sun. I don't know if she's smoking. It looks like she's smoking to me.
Yeah.
Which is what a French person would do.
It looks like she's had plenty of sun also.
This may just be a picture of someone with advanced Frenchness.
It's terminal
like
Frenchness.
The disease has gone too far. And now they're sitting there just completely leather-skinned.
Yeah.
Smoking a cigarette, and their eyes are glowing red about how much they feel they are superior to Americans. And they're just, Well, that's the case of one too many baguettes. I think that's what that is.
There you go.
So, did you know in Spanish, a baguette it translates to just bar of bread? I found that great.
Baguette is a French word, though.
Yeah, I know, but when they say, I think it's, I don't remember what it is.
So when that word is translated into Spanish,
yeah,
you literally say
I think it's bar de pan or something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
Which is bar of bread.
Hey,
because they just call bread pan because it's the thing that goes in the pan. The Spanish are very literal and simple people. Not the Mexicans, the Spanish.
Right.
The Mexicans can't help it that they have the Spanish language. And theirs is better than the European Spanish because they don't do that weird thing where they pronounce C's as th or whatever.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
I'm very annoyed at that.
Like,
is it Sicily? You mean Sicily? Like, shut up. Learn to go to Mexico and learn to speak Spanish. Is it Sicily? Ugh. The Spanish deserve nothing. Okay, so Smokestack, how do we steal the culture back? How do we, through some act of trickery or cunning or strategy, get the masses to support the good, the true, and the beautiful, and stop descending into degrading, decadent, degenerate slavery. We can't. The answer can't be we wake them up and red pill them.
Yeah,
because any solution that requires the masses being aware is doomed to fail. So how do we, as well, I was gonna say movement, but we're not really a movement. We're more like servants of light, maybe.
Yeah.
Warriors of goodness. I don't know what our exact title is. Something in there. How do we bring the light and rescue humanity from this downward spiral? How do we steal the culture? Because there was this John Vervanke, who is this professor in Toronto, I think. He talks about how Augustine stole the culture from the bottom up underneath the feet of the Roman Empire. So how do we likewise do the same in our day? Any ideas? Any ideas from you or listener?
Well, let's see. You need a carrot and a stick, typically, to modify people's behavior, right? And people are, kind of vain, and most of people are sort of insecure, and don't want to be outside of the crowd. So maybe we ostracize and make fun of people practicing degeneracy.
Well, we've been trying that for a while.
That could be the stick. Well, you think maybe we just haven't been doing it enough?
I don't know. It might be working. I don't know. Like I just did. I mocked the Spanish.
Yeah.
And yet the Spanish are still what they are.
Well, I think the younger generation coming up, the younger ones than us, are more kind of based in trad than our generation is. In my observation.
Well, it would be hard to be more degenerate than millennials. So,
yeah,
maybe there's just nothing. But okay, so yes, that's a good technique. But I was thinking. So, here's how I got started on this.
Okay,
I was watching a guy try to open a pickle jar.
Oh no!
I know, and it was sad because he couldn't do it. And this lady handed him a pickle jar and asked him to open it. He couldn't open the pickle jar. And then he handed it to someone else, and they couldn't open the pickle jar. And it wasn't because they were all weak. It's because they didn't have a right technique.
Right.
Now, how do you, if I were to ask you to describe the process of opening a difficult-to-open pickle jar, what is your process?
You mean muscular process, or am I employing tools and techniques?
Just your hands, what God gave you when you were born.
I'm gonna say jar in left hand. I'm gonna wrench my elbows forward, right, and then I'm gonna put my right hand over the lid, and then I'm gonna twist with my whole body, bring my elbows and shoulders into it, and just right up against my chest, just the whole upper body.
Right up against your chest.
Yeah,
that's crucial.
Yeah.
These people were all trying to do it with their hands extended away from their body. And I was like, what are you doing?
Nerds.
Why? Because it's basic leverage that you're stronger closer to your body than with your arms outstretched.
Yep.
They were trying to do it like they were resting it on the counter was their problem, and trying to do it on the counter.
Oh.
With their arms outstretched.
Yeah.
And that's you get like 5 times more the turning power if you hold it against your chest.
Yep.
It's basic physics. It's basic leverage, right? And then I was like, aha, that's how we do it. We need leverage.
Leverage.
Leverage. Like this idea of leverage, because think about it. What do they say when they talk about people that are controlling the system, ruling the system? The levers of power.
Okay. Yeah.
Like leverage, the balance of power. Another term relating to leverage. It's so the language always gives you away. Like, how do the powerful exert their power? How do the few control the many? It's because they have levers. They have leverage to maintain their balance.
Right.
And so I was thinking about leverage in the metaphysical sense, because every physical law is but a dim shadow of a metaphysical law. That's true.
Whoa.
Just take it at face value.
Okay.
But it's true. Like the idea of like friction, like if you're trying to change direction, like, and if you try to, like if you have momentum in the physical space, it's hard to stop and go the other way. And if you have momentum in your life, it's the same thing. It's hard to start, like, you know, it's the same. All the physical laws are reflections of metaphysical laws. So this idea of leverage. So like, and they also talk about leverage they describe what is leverage. They describe debt as leverage and loans as leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same word.
Yep.
They say, oh, are you buying Bitcoin on leverage? Which means, are you going to get wrecked?
You're over-levered.
You're over-levered. Don't invest on leverage unless you really know what you're doing. And these people get excited and they're like, I'm gonna mortgage my house and buy Bitcoin. And like, just don't do that.
No.
That's how people get destroyed. Like, because they just don't do that.
Maybe
we should have
given this. We should have given this warning last week, but I guess better late than
Well,
never.
no, because it worked out. Everyone was excited. I don't remember telling people to buy Doge. Apparently, we did.
I don't remember that either.
Doge. And people were like, "Thank you for telling me to get Doge." I was like, "Well, you're welcome." I don't think I did, but maybe I did.
Yeah.
But I'll take credit for it anyway.
We've
never, as far as I'm aware, we've never given bad financial advice on this show.
If you bought Doge and you hit the jackpot, we'll take credit for that. But if you lost your shirt, we didn't have anything to do with it.
Correct. We only have things to do with successes.
Yeah.
I saw a meme going around. You know that House Hunters show where the couple goes and they look for a house?
Yep.
And their budget's always like obscene.
Yep.
It's like, our budget's $20 million and I work at a yogurt store.
Right.
It's like, what? There was one that going around, at least two people, and there was the guy and the girl. It's like, their occupations were early Dogecoin investor and OnlyFans. And I was like, that's the Zoomer way. The millennial Zs that's how they will make their fortunes. Power couple. But anyway, leverage, they describe debt as leverage. And there's so like, what is metaphysical leverage, or what is leverage in like the social economic sense,
Mm-hmm.
or the social mover sense? Well, leverage is basically force multipliers.
Okay.
So if you have a lever, it multiplies your force. So the earliest form of leverage, I guess, in that other sort of sense, would be having people work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then it's like, I could move the rocks and build the wall, but if I employ 10 people to move the rocks to build the wall, I do 10 times the work.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a form of leverage. And that would basically be the leverage of capitalism for most of its history. But then I realized that what we're in now is a system of... And some guy said this, and he's an Indian fellow, but I don't remember what his name is. He said what we're in now is a system of almost nearly infinite leverage. Which is why so few tech companies can have such large outsized influence on the whole world.
I see.
Like, it doesn't matter like how hard you're pushing if the other guy has a lever that is long enough to move the moon.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so his point was, this fellow, he said, look, if leverage is a force multiplier, like, one of the greatest force multipliers is when you can make a thing and it has zero reproduction costs. You can just reproduce it infinitely as many times as you want forever.
Right.
And this is the digital space. And so, like, in the old days, if you wanted to convince people that they needed to be bestiality enthusiasts,
Okay.
let's say, you would have to go give a lecture at like a university.
Yep.
And then maybe you'd have to, and then that'd be it. You talk to the 100 people that came. They might want to stone you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you escaped, then you'd have to go give another lecture somewhere.
Right.
Maybe you could have written a book, but then for anyone else to read, there'd only be the one copy, and someone would have to hand make copies. So your ability to have psychological leverage of your ideas over large swaths of people was limited. And really one of the only ways you could do it was to start some cult where a bunch of people would repeat your message verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
And that would give you sort of a spiritual leverage over the world. So it was difficult. And so the cultures didn't change that rapidly because the ability of small individuals to get large amounts of leverage of that form was limited. Okay, but now, well, at least when we had the printing press, that changed a little bit, and you see the printing press cause all sorts of problems, lots of wars, lots of stirs up of religion, not just in Europe, but all over, because you could, for very negligible, although not free, but for close to free costs, you could write a book and then reproduce it for almost free, and it would go around. Your meme would spread.
Mm-hmm.
So your leverage of your idea got so much more. But now we're in this stage where, like, you can write an article on Vice saying that incest is good, and you need to do incest. And it doesn't matter if most people instinctively are like, ew, what are you talking about? Because you can just infinitely reproduce it and send it to almost everybody on the globe, and then you infect enough susceptible people with that message that then the next time it goes out, you get a little bit more. And the next time it goes out, you get a little bit more. And so you just have this near infinite psychological leverage over people.
Right. That and if it's further multiplied depending on how destructive or powerful your message is. So, I mean,
yes.
if you convince 10 people to take up knitting, the world doesn't change. But if you can convince 10 people to do some sort of horrible atrocity, that will change the world.
Right, and then you get into, because you have this, but then it gets to infinite because you have like network effects.
Yep. Yeah.
Because as an idea becomes more popular, the costs of not accepting that idea increase also.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like if you have a small town of 100 people, and there are 10 languages each spoke by 10 people, and then if another person comes into the town and he chooses one of the languages, well, now one of the languages is slightly more advantageous to learn to speak because it has 11 people speaking it. So you can communicate with one more person, like 10% more than you could with any other.
Right.
So then the other people came in, they're more likely to choose that language, let's say English. And then all of a sudden you got like 30 people speaking it and 10 people speaking all the other words, and now it's done. Everyone else that comes in there is just going to learn to speak English, and the others are going to fade away. Because that's just the network effect of like the more people that choose the thing, the more useful it becomes. It's similar to like the social justice narrative. The more people that accept the social justice, the more useful it is to conform yourself to the social justice so that you get the benefits of that crowd.
Right.
So you have this, so you can spread your message, and this is why Zuckerberg can cancel the president, even though most every world leader, including lefty ones, said this is bad, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Angela Merkel got up there and said this is very distressing. You can't take the president of a country off the social media.
Yep.
Because she realized very accurately that Facebook could do the same to her.
Yep.
Right? And Facebook was like, psh, YOLO.
And they never had to. The social media companies never faced any consequences for doing that to Trump.
Right, because they have incredible social leverage.
Yeah,
people cannot like it, but like they have an infinitely reproducing system that has no costs to spread its message.
Yeah,
and it has tremendous network effects. Same with Twitter. Same with
the power of government. Isn't exactly where we all thought it was. You know.
Right. No, it's about who has the leverage. So in the past, like the king would have the most leverage because he'd have the most people working for him, right? Mm-hmm. He also had he had town criers that would take his idea and spread it around. And then, so that he had the most leverage. And then until recently, the governments had the most leverage because they could control, to some degree, they influenced the media and they could control what workers did and all this stuff. So they had a lot of leverage. But now the leverage of even most countries is dwarfed by the near infinite leverage provided people by the internet.
Yep.
Okay, so levers of power. So if we imagine this game of levers of power, and you sort of see society as a seesaw, and on one side you've got the right wing, the so-called right wing, and on the other side you've got the left wing, and each of them wants to control the other. Who's going to win? And the answer is whoever has the greatest mechanical advantage. So if the lever is such that you have mechanical advantage on your side, it's going to be very difficult for the other side to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get on a seesaw with the fulcrum off center and see how well you can win a wrestle match against the other person.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work because it's physics, right? So if this is true, what is the fulcrum in this situation around which these levers of power turn? And the thing I'm going to posit,
mm-hmm.
could be wrong. I think I'm going to posit that the fulcrum in this particular situation is the moral foundation of the society.
Okay.
And that's what it goes around. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, right? For leverage to be on the left side, the fulcrum has to be on the right. Make sense?
I mean, it makes sense from a seesaw standpoint, but I don't understand it in a sociological standpoint.
Okay. All right. Well, this is why I think pendulums in the arc of history swing back and forth.
Okay.
Because when the moral assumptions are on one side, the other side can use those, or rather, they use the failings of the society to live up to those stated virtues.
I see.
As powerful leverage.
Yeah.
To control the system.
So, like, hold your enemy to his own standards.
Right, exactly. And if they do so enough, they're able to. But see, if they do so too much, then the fulcrum scoots over to their side, and then they lose the leverage.
Right.
So currently, again, this is a postulate. I'm giving a hypothesis here. Our fulcrum right now is perhaps deceptively extremely right wing.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that's why the left has so much cultural power, because it can manipulate those right-wing values whenever it wants. Examples. Freedom of choice. Each man is an island unto himself who decides. No one can tell me what to do, and so forth. Like the great pioneering spirit, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how far of a way is that to be leveraged into my body, my choice, my gender, my choice, my sexuality, my choice? Well, who are you to impose your morality on me?
Right.
Does that make sense? Okay. Mm-hmm. Or, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Like, yes, exactly so. So then, why are you against immigration? If we're all just pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, why not simply have as many people as possible, and they will sink or swim on their own merits?
Mm-hmm.
You aren't owed anything just for being born here or having parents, right?
Right.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Or payment of debts. Like, you must pay your debt. That debt, in this case, such ideas as like time theft, which is absurd. Like, as though you could buy and sell time. I've always been against that. It's like, what are you talking about? You can't buy. And that's evidence of an extremely right-wing culture, at least in the economic sense. So, likewise, the inability of people to expunge their student debt. Like, this is basically the rise of debtors' prisons.
Right.
So, they rest on an extremely right-wing view of morality around debt and being a person who pays what you owe and not freeloading and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then you just leverage that real easily into like, well, reparations for slavery or colonialism or what have you. Because long ago, bad thing happened. Where's repayment of this debt?
Right.
So it's a left-wing move, but leveraged off a right-wing foundation.
Well, let's pause here for a second, because I find it really interesting that this seems to validate the idea that it's a very effective tactic for the left to point out the hypocrisy of the right, but it's completely ineffective for the right to point out the hypocrisy of the left.
Correct.
And I've always wondered, why is that? And I thought, well, it's just because the left doesn't care if they're hypocrites, which is probably true, but it makes more sense that it doesn't matter because the fulcrum is on the right.
Right. So because people are like, well, yeah, but this is the things we care about.
Right.
And like they don't care about the quote unquote left wing. Like the moral foundation is not on the left wing, and so the hypocrisy over those things does not register.
Right.
Right? So they can point out your hypocrisy. See, this is why it's such a powerful move, and they have mechanical advantage. So, and this is why, like you said, people can go round and round, and people do all the time, to much uselessness, of accusing the other side of hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
Because every left-wing move of force requires a right-wing foundation in the fulcrum, and vice versa. And this is just always dependent on the worldview of the other. So, take the other extreme, in the case when the fulcrum is on the left. National Socialism, Nazism. Extreme right-wing, okay, but socialism like in the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was based off left-wing foundations of the state's obligations to its citizens taken to the extreme.
Yep.
And so they said, well, if that's the case, if the society does owe like it's to the service of its citizens, then our sole duty is to the obligation of Germans at the expense of anyone else. Because, you read some of Hitler's campaign proposals and they sound like something Bernie Sanders would say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really do.
Yeah.
Because in order for the extreme right to be successful, you have to operate in a society with extreme left assumptions, and vice versa. And that's why you see this playing out right now. Like the alt-right or the new right or whatever is increasingly courting leftist ideas as justification for their desired plays.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, like
that's
Richard
the only
Spencer
place
voted,
you can get leverage, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Spencer voted for Biden, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. White Nationalist believes that is a better play in the long run for white people because he can if you listen to him, he then says yes, and we take this life, and then you have this left wing idea, and he's like, and then we apply it in this way, and then it's whatever I wanted, right?
Right.
So what do? If we find ourselves in a position as we do now, with a right-shifted fulcrum, an extreme left-wing wielding leverage, how do we restore balance? Because I don't think it's good. Like our goal, if our goal is to shift it to the extreme right, that's also deadly. Because both sides get a lot of people killed and cause a lot of misery because they're both operating on hypocrisies. And we here at MAPS, we're like the Jedi, right? We're here to bring balance to the Force.
Okay.
We're after balance. We're not after like bringing it to the, because if you say, well, there it's on the extreme left. One of my favorite quotes. There's this old, I think, unfortunately, it's a Spanish proverb, and as I said, the Spanish deserve nothing. But they said that humanity may be compared to a man who kept falling off his mule on the left side. So to correct it, he fell off his mule on the right side. And that's what we do. We just go back and forth like, well, this is bad. Let's go off on the other side. We have to balance. Because that's the only thing that you can only stand on a seesaw that's balanced. If it's to one side. So how do we move the fulcrum to a place where we are more in balance?
Are you about to convert me to Marxism or something?
Yes. This is now Marxist show. We are now Red Scare 2. We are Great Soviet Union.
Yeah.
No. But no, I was thinking, so if you imagine this seesaw of power thing, well, how do you, if someone else has the mechanical advantage on you, what are some things that you can do to reduce that?
Mm-hmm.
And there's basically two moves you can make. One is change how far away the weight is on your side.
Okay.
So it reduces so if you move back away, you increase your lever, right? And so this is, I think, a lot of the driving force behind the desire to get out of cities, be independent, homestead, because you're taking away you're moving backwards and taking some of their leverage away.
Okay. So socially, you're distancing yourselves. I almost said social distancing.
Yes.
You're distancing your life from the fulcrum.
Yeah.
And
right.
the opposite direction of your enemy.
Which is real social distancing. What they ask people to practice is physical distancing. I don't know why they insist on, like, They want you to be 6 feet apart is physical distancing, not so. I don't understand what that means, but
Yeah, good point.
everything is mislabeled. So in essence, you move back, you move away, but that can go too far into just this tendency to just want to retreat all the time.
Yep.
So you gotta be careful, but it is an effective move to be like, well, let's just remove some things further back on the seesaw here.
Yeah, you're reducing your dependencies on your enemy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one way to change the balance, and the other is the only other way is to change. Well, there's another way is to add more weight on your side, but that just means adding more people that think like you, which I guess is one thing that we're trying to do. But the other way is you change the position of the fulcrum, and this is what St. Augustine did and how he stole the culture.
You mean Constantine?
No, Augustine.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Constantine earlier in the show.
Oh, well, I may have, but I meant
Okay.
Augustine.
Okay.
That's how he stole the culture. Right? So, how do you do that? And I think again, this is all working theory to be critiqued and attacked. But I'm claiming that a lot of this, the changing of the fulcrum, can be accomplished via rethinking our positions about debt and what debt is.
Debt, okay.
Because that is really like debt is more that people are like economics, right? But debt is like such a powerful moral idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you think about it, like all the world's religions use debt language. Like forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors.
Yep.
Right? Or and the Rig Veda talks about how like when you're born you owe a debt to the gods and a debt to your aunts. And then the Buddhism talks about debt and creditors of karma. Like it's all like karmic debt. Mm-hmm. It's there all because it's such a nebulous notion like what debt even is. And it's used in different ways depending on what people need. I mean, think about how confused this is. Every religion and society has always held money lenders in disregard.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it is a moral necessity that you pay your debts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's evil to lend money, but you must repay it.
Right.
Right? See how it's this big moral confusion.
Yeah.
And it's a moral confusion exacerbated, in our case, by our fake idea of what money is. So listener and smokestack,
Mm-hmm.
I ask you a question. How did money come to be? Like, how did we make money? If you had to go through a history of like the evolution of money.
People were looking for efficient ways to exchange value, and they were bartering is inefficient. So they said, okay, well, let's use some things that everybody needs, and we'll store our value in that. So salt, grain, things like that, fungible commodities. And eventually, you didn't want to carry around your sacks of grain or salt, so you could give people a redeemable coupon for a sack of grain or salt. And that was changed, and those were transferable to grain or salt whenever you wanted to, or you could just carry around the coupons. And eventually, question mark, money.
Yeah, and that's the story that we've all been told.
Yeah.
That's what everyone's been told on the whole globe, is that's how money happened. The problem with it is that there's no evidence for that whatsoever.
Of course not.
That's the big problem with it, is that that's another thing that's fake.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the problem, is that the mythological barter society has never been found. So and this really got started, Adam Smith started this when he wrote Wealth of Nations, and he basically started the idea of economies and economics.
Right.
And he wanted to do so because he was trying to justify economics as like a field of science on its own that happened it was just like a natural law that people would do. And he believed and argued persuasively, because everyone believes it now, that economies and markets just happened, and then governments would take over regulation of the thing that was already happening.
Okay.
Right. He did not believe that markets were a function of government systems or anything like that they existed on their own, and then governments would get involved later. And so after he wrote his book in, what was that? I think it was the 1700s. He justified his on a make-believe land. Like everybody does.
Yep.
Everything is a make-believe land. And his make-believe land was sort of an amalgamation of American Indians and the steppe peoples. Yep. And he's like, well, we can imagine an ancient society that had hunter-gatherers, and they had bows and arrows, and they would hunt moose and on horseback, and that's in his book. And then he uses this and says, and then there was this and they needed money because it got hard to transfer their pelts everywhere all the time. Right. The issue is that after he wrote his book and we continued to explore the globe and go into the jungles and go into the untouched parts of Africa and go into the Aboriginal societies of Australia, they never found anyone operating on this barter system. It never happened. All of them had some form of currency. No matter how primitive their society seemed to be, there was some form, it may have been a weird form, but there was some form of like medium of exchange and currency. And so if you pick up an economics textbook, it will always begin, every one of them, you can go check this out for yourself, with the author's own version of a fantasy world. So their own Lord of the Rings.
Where does the fantasy line, where is that drawn? Is it there was no economy that used a fungible commodity as a currency? So are you saying that there was never a culture that, for example, traded pounds of salt for other things and that was what everybody used? Or are you saying that everybody skipped straight to the coupon, but the coupon just kind of existed upon different theories?
That there was never a society that was like, I have eggs and I want to trade with you for bear pelts. Okay. And that guy said, now I have eggs and I'm going to take my eggs and go to such and such. And I mean, barter does happen, but it was never the basis around a society.
Okay, so the currency, quote unquote currency, encompasses things like fungible commodities.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you pick up an economics textbook, they always create a Lord of the Rings, where there is barter land. Right. And so here's an example. This is a textbook by economist John Driffel. And he takes us to what appears to be an imaginary New England town. One can imagine an old-style farmer bartering with the blacksmith, the tailor, the grocer, and the doctor in his small town. For simple barter to work, however, there must be a double coincidence of wants. Henry has potatoes and wants shoes. Joshua has an extra pair of shoes and wants potatoes. Bartering can make them both happier. But if Henry has firewood and Joshua does not need any of that, then bartering for Joshua's shoes requires one or both of them to go searching for more people in hope of making a multilateral exchange. Money provides a way for making multilateral exchange much simpler. Henry sells his firewood to someone else for money and uses the money to buy Joshua's shoes. right? And
Right.
you can see how that is obviously not going to happen anyway. Because this is just a make-believe land, just like we have now, except money somehow plucked away.
Right.
Right? So they're saying everything would work the same except no money. As though the presence of money didn't shape how we currently operate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Adam Smith was saying, well, look how people operate. What would it be like if they didn't have money? And then he said they'd do the same thing, but much less inefficiently. And that's obvious. That's like a circle. It's like, no, they're operating the way they're operating now because of the money. If you took the money away, they wouldn't operate like that. That's why this is why the barter system never happened. It's all just make believe. It's all just fake.
Mm-hmm.
Who in their right mind would set up a grocery in such a place?
Right.
Right. But he talks about going to the grocery and he can't find, but how would you, you wouldn't even set up the grocery. Right. And so in the years after Columbus, when the Spanish and the Portuguese went adventuring around the world, spreading their Sicily everywhere, they never reported encountering anyone that lived in a land of barter. It was never found.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone just assumed, when they went to the West Indies and Africa, that they would have some form of money, because every society always had. And they were correct. Adam Smith, on the other hand, was determined to say, no, it actually happened like this, and there was barter, and barter, and then that was inefficient, so then they made money, and that was and has always been a fantasy.
Interesting.
That never happened.
So money arises from unknown, as of this point in the conversation, sources, and was not preceded
Correct.
by anything. Okay.
Right. So here's Smith's basic argument, which I'll lay out because it is the great founding myth of the discipline of economics, without which economics would cease to exist, and it should. Because they're always wrong, and they just do a lot of damage. And they go around saying, this is what happened to the 2008 financial crisis, is they go around being like, well, we have all these financial instruments now, and we need astrophysicists actually to calculate it and to figure out, it's so complicated, it's wonderful, and no one is ever, we're making great strides, and there's no possible way, and then it turns out it was just fancy names for debt.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just fancy ways of doing the same thing they've done forever.
Yep.
Which is the great sneakiness of democracies, is just rebranding things that they've always done, and they rephrase them so that they look nice. Which is why I'm anti-democratic. So the United States, in the olden days, an empire would go around the world. They would conquer places, and then they demand that their vassal states paid them tribute. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And America goes around, and it puts a gun to people's says, loan me money. And then they buy our bonds.
Yep.
And then, but what's the difference? The only difference is this word is, if a burglar comes up to you and says, give me $100, and then later he comes up to another guy and says, loan me $100, the gun still remains.
Yeah.
Right? This is just a game at that point of rhetoric. It's like, I'll pay you back in the future. It's not, this isn't tribute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give it back to you. Now, at the time I give it back to you, inflation will have made it so that I paid you less. But whatever.
Yep.
I still need it now, and I'm still using the loan that Germany's giving me, for example, when it buys my bonds, to fund the military occupation of its country. So, but it isn't, it's not imperialism. No. It's a loan.
Yeah, it's just a loan. It's just economics, guys. This free market.
Democracy is so good at this manipulation of language.
Yeah.
It confuses so many people. This is why they bang on about slavery, because they don't realize they are basically also enslaved. The modern, wage slavery and all this stuff.
Yep.
It's the same thing. It just has the illusion that you have a choice about it.
Yep.
And it's very persuasive. And then they're like, but look at the real thing. This is the real. And it was hundreds of years. But look how bad it was. And then people are like, yeah, that's bad. I guess I'm not that. And they're like, but I actually have less than they did, comparatively speaking. And I have less access to like health care.
Yep.
And my children have less economic opportunity. And so it's just this constant rebranding, which we have to figure out a way to destroy. You can't. This language rhetoric must be. Anyway,
it just as an interesting aside, it's quite often these days that I hear about the height of American civilization.
Yeah.
By the example of even our poor people have big TVs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute. You're going to measure wealth and human prosperity in TVs. Probably one of the most destructive and anti-human flourishing devices ever created.
Yeah, it's like that would be like saying our poor are so wealthy they even have Vicodin.
Right, yeah.
Like, let's give them an addictive chemical that makes them...
the meth that they want.
They have all the meth... I mean, that's the same thing as TV.
Right.
I mean, for a lot of people, it just makes them lethargic. It fills their head with poison and hatred and jealousy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, this is it. That's not a good metric.
Yeah, and the thing is, if the powers that be that can convince you that you are wealthy because you have TV and pot, your entire civilizational wealth can be stolen from you right from under your nose, and you won't even notice or lift a finger until one day you realize, if you ever realize, what's been taken.
Or if you start to realize it, because of a great economic collapse, then they'll just reroute your anger towards patriarchy and white people.
Yeah. Bam.
Which is what they do. They're like, well, this is getting a little too close to home. Let's blame it on colonialism.
Yeah.
And not on the predatory banking practices we've been doing for decades.
Yeah.
You know, and then people fall for it because of the TV that you gave them to convince them that they were rich.
It's really beautiful in a way because it's like America has been colonized by international banking cartel type power structures, and our wealth is as a people is being suctioned off and placed in the bank accounts of these incredibly powerful banking interests. And so it's like there is a predatory colonization of our country going on right now, and we're fighting about the colonialism of the past empire that's all dead and gone, and who should be paid back for that. We're not even paying attention to the one that's happening right now.
Yeah, precisely. Or the one that's happening now is justified as a repayment of debt for the one that happened in the past.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, so Adam Smith, his argument starts out he lays out what his basis for economic life. He says, quote, a certain propensity in human nature, the propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another, end quote. Animals don't do this. Quote, nobody, he says, ever saw a dog make a fair and deliberate exchange of a bone for another with another dog. Humans, if left to their own devices, will inevitably begin swapping and comparing things. And then, end quote. This is just what humans do.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Smith's mind, logic and conversation are just forms of trading. And humans always try to seek their best advantage. And so this is the profit. So they're always seeking the greatest profit they can get from any exchange. Now,
right.
Notice Smith begins the mercantilization of all aspects of human life here.
Yep.
Like this is why the manosphere talks of the sexual marketplace, which is such a destructive idea.
Yeah.
That the relationships is just a marketplace where you buy and sell, or like the marketplace of ideas. We've marketplaced everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, evidence that the fulcrum is so far to the right wing, at least on the economic spectrum, that sexual relationships and ideas are viewed as a marketplace.
Yeah.
which is why the left has the leverage, because the fulcrum is so far on the right, and that's why, as you said, charges of hypocrisy don't do anything to the left because the moral fulcrum's on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So, and in Smith's view, it's this drive to exchange goods, which creates the division of labor. Right? That's what he says. He says, so from the desire to exchange goods, we get the division of labor. And then from there, he makes one of his fantasy lands, and he goes right into it. He says, quote, in a tribe of hunters or shepherds, a particular person makes bows and arrows, for example, with more readiness and dexterity than any other. He frequently then exchanges them for cattle or venison with his companions, and he finds at last that he can, in this manner, get more cattle and venison than if he himself went to the field to catch them. From a regard to his own interests, therefore, the making of bows and arrows grows to be his chief business, and he becomes a sort of armorer. Another excels in making the frames and covers of their little huts and movable houses. He is accustomed to being of use in this way to his neighbors, who reward him in the same manner with cattle and venison, till at last he finds it in his interest to dedicate himself entirely to this employment, and they become a sort of house carpenter. In the same manner, a third becomes a smith or a brazier, a fourth a tanner or a dresser of hides or skins, the principal part of clothing of savages. End quote. So notice how, as in so many of these, he has a tendency to just slip from imaginary savages to small town English shopkeepers. Right? So it's just, Here we are. It's my imaginary fantasy land of pretend savages. And then question mark, New England shop.
Right.
Right? And then he continues. But the division of labor when the division of labor first began to take place, this power of exchanging must frequently have been very much clogged and embarrassed in its operations. One man, we shall suppose, has more of a certain commodity than he himself has occasion for, while the other has less. The former, consequently, would be glad to dispose of, and the latter purchase, a part of this superfluidity. But if in this land, yada, 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 it's the same story we all know about how, and then you have to produce coinage and right? Everybody will inevitably start stockpiling something they figure everyone else is likely to want. And then he says this has a paradoxical effect because at a certain point, rather than making a commodity less valuable, since everybody has some, it becomes more valuable because it becomes effectively a currency.
Right.
Right? And so then he goes into basically what you said. He said salt is said to be a common instrument of commerce and exchange in Abyssinia, a species of shells in some parts of the coast of India, dried cod at Newfoundland, tobacco in Virginia, sugar in some of our West India colonies, leather in some countries, and there is at this day a village in Scotland where it is not uncommon, I am told, for a workman to carry nails instead of money to the baker's shop or alehouse. Now, that wasn't true. There was no Scottish people were paying for anything in nails. That doesn't, but nonetheless, right? It's the founding myth of economics here. And then he gets into, of course, that they tried all these things, and eventually it was found, what do you know, the best thing for using as commodities for trade is precious metals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously, it's easy to see where this is going, because irregular metal is easier to barter, but wouldn't it be better if we standardized it in units and stamped it some pieces with uniform designations, guaranteeing the weights and fineness in different denominations? Wouldn't that be easier still? And then yada, 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 question mark, coinage, and there we go. And that's the founding myth of economics. As I said, it's based on fantasy lands that were never, ever found.
So then how does your view of economics and how economies function change if you reject the idea that there were barter economies and all that stuff?
I think economics ceases to exist.
Oh, really? So
I think it just goes away. Yeah, because I mean, the very idea that there's something called an economy, Smith's just made up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, no one ever talked about the economy before Adam Smith, right? And for economists to imagine that the economy exists, for them to have a field of study about,
mm-hmm.
they have to imagine this propensity for bartering, which goes into this. So even the idea of the economy is fake. The economy is a made-up artifice. It doesn't. A society can function perfectly well without this idea, right? So like I know this is hard, but when I'm delivering, you have to get out of the matrix. You have to go so far back into your programming.
Okay,
listen, barters is false.
So even the idea of an economy existing is a deceitful and superfluous mental structure that is unnaturally placed upon us
through a fake idea of a barter system turning into coinage, which didn't happen.
Okay, and then that mental structure is used against us by bankers or what have you.
Correct. And I don't think that they know that they are running a matrix line. Okay. I think it's just something we fell into as a society. Now, I will say that economists have been made aware since that this barter system doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was never there. They've never reneged on this, even though they still continue to do it. They continue to use this as a justification, because if they don't, the whole idea falls apart.
So this is like the evolutionary missing link of economics that has not been actually located.
Right.
It's all just assumed.
And this idea of we evolved out of a barter economy is so ubiquitous. The author, he goes into this. He said, because he was an anthropologist, and he said, at one point, I was in a town in Madagascar. And he said, I had the privilege of interviewing a Kalanaro, which is a tiny ghostly creature that a local spirit medium claimed to keep hidden in a chest in his home.
Wow.
So the spirit belonged to the brother of a notorious local loan shark who lived a long time ago. A horrible woman named Nordine. And he says, to be honest, I was reluctant having anything to do with the family and this weird ghost spirit. But some of my anthropology friends insisted, and since, after all, this creature was from ancient times, right, I went and spoke. And the creature spoke to him from behind a screen in an eerie sort of otherworldly quaver. So it's some Madagascaran guy going, I am the spirit from long ago, behind a screen. Okay. He's just doing that and getting people to pay him money, like a medium, I guess.
Yeah,
which is a great gig. Why, you will have many prosperity. Some guy in Madagascar. But anyway, he says all this spirit was interested in talking about was money, it seemed, no matter what. It's like how much it was going to cost. So finally, someone exasperated by the charade, I said, and what did you use for money back in ancient times when you were still alive? And the mysterious voice stopped for a minute and said, no, in ancient times we didn't use money. We bartered commodities directly. Because this idea is so ubiquitous but as I said, there's not only no evidence it didn't happen, there's enormous evidence it did not.
Right.
So I said Adam Smith said his story in Aboriginal North America mixed with people with yurts or something. Mm-hmm. But in his defense, at least at the time, reliable information on Native American economic systems was unavailable in Scottish libraries where he was writing this thing. Right. But his successors do not have the same excuse. By mid-century, Lewis Morgan, his descriptions of the Six Nations of Iroquois, among others, were very widely published, and they made clear that the main economy among the Iroquois were longhouses where most of the goods were stockpiled and then allocated by councils of women. No one ever traded arrowheads for slabs of meat, for example. Mm-hmm. Never, this hypothetical, and I have my arrows and I give them to you and you give me elk, never occurred.
So they just were straight up managed socialist system. They didn't even have commerce.
Right. They had a. See, the thing is, they had a what you might call a coinage. But it was not printed. It was literally fake money. It was imaginary money. And people have done this a lot. Fake money isn't new. after the fall of the Roman Empire, people in Europe would continue to trade in Roman currency they did not have. So they would just keep ledgers of who owed what in the same units.
Right.
But it was never printed. The coins weren't there, but they said, well, this is whatever many, I don't know what the Roman, but say denarius or something. This is 3 denarii. And then they'd write a piece of paper and says, you gave me and I have the 3. And then they just kept and they kept using Charlemagne's coins for centuries after Charlemagne was gone and they were no longer printed. But they just kept them in their head or on pieces of paper on ledgers. Wow. So it was still used. So fake money goes back a long way. Okay. So even though they knew the Iroquois never did the trading bows and arrows for bison, they just ignored it. They just kept running with the same. Stanley Jevons in 1871 wrote what is now considered the classic book on the origins of money. Right? Like this is like where all of these things on the origins of money come from. And he took his example straight from Smith, with Indians swapping elk for beaver hides, and made no use whatsoever of the actual descriptions of the Indian life that had been printed. They just kept pretending they were these weird, like they just kept living in the fantasy land.
Yeah.
So that is a problem. And at this time, the English were spreading out around the world, and they kept looking for. A lot of the missionaries they would actually had Adam Smith's book with them, because it was one of the popular books of the time, and they would like to be read on it. So you could, at the parties, you could converse with everybody,
Sure.
And they would go into the jungles of Indonesia, and they'd have their Bible, and they'd have the Wealth of Nations, and they'd have Shakespeare. And they'd be like, well, and they always expecting to find they'd always carry things with them for bartering, and they never found anyone to take it. They would sell them, they would give them their currency in exchange or whatever.
Yeah.
Or write them an IOU.
Right.
But they weren't like, but we don't really do a barter system. Like they never found the I'll give you 20 chickens for a cow guy.
Right.
It just didn't occur. And so the definitive anthropological work on barter, by Caroline Humphrey of Cambridge, could not be more definitive. She says, quote, "No example of a barter economy pure and simple has ever been described, let alone the emergence of money from it. All available ethnography suggests there has never been such a thing." So, that's another thing that's fake and gay.
Adam Smith debunked
Adam Smith and all economists ever. You're all wrong.
It's about time.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Now
bartering did happen between strangers that were never likely to meet again.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do have examples of bartering, it is two sides of war that are not going to go, they decide to trade something rather than go to war, or strangers on the road. But people that lived in societies and communities always found it necessary to have some sort of money.
So barter is what happens when there's zero cultural connection or trust.
Correct. And when we base our economy off that, we get a society which has zero cultural connections or trust.
But we don't base our society off that. We base it off of economics and money. Wait, I don't understand.
Oh, well, see, the economics and money is based on this idea of a barter, that we're just doing fancy barter.
Okay. So in a society, if a society had trust and didn't have economics, how then would it conduct its commerce?
Good question. And this gets into primordial debt. In the beginning, every being is born as a debt owed to the gods, the saints, the fathers, and to men. If one makes a sacrifice, it is because of a debt owing to the gods from birth. If one recites a sacred text, it is because of a debt owing to the saints. If one wishes for offspring, it is because of a debt due to the fathers from birth. And if one gives hospitality, it is because it is a debt owing to men. Satpatha Brahmana. in the Vedas. And also in the Rig Veda, let us drive away the evil effects of bad dreams just as we pay off debts. The debt language exists prior to the money.
Ooh.
The debt language began as a spiritual idea that you had to give something back to that which was given to you. So the reason economics textbooks begin with imaginary villages and steppe peoples morphing into New Englanders is because it's been impossible to talk about real ones because they don't exist. So then why has this myth been has this myth continued anyway? Mainstream economists have been happy to jettison other elements of the Wealth of Nations, like Smith's labor theory of value, disapproval of joint stock corporations and whatever. But they have not written off the myth of barter as another like quaint Enlightenment parable. Instead, they keep hammering it despite all the historical evidence pointing to it. The answer seems to be the myth of barter cannot go away because it's central to the entire discourse of economics, right? Because the Wealth of Nations was above all an attempt to establish the discipline of economics as a science which existed on its own in the natural world and was not a function of society or government.
Okay.
So it was like, again, this is another problem of nerds having physics envy because they want their stupid discipline to be as precise as like what Isaac Newton could do, and they can't. So it's all just physics LARPing. But let's imagine how this there was another theory of value at the time, another theory of money, which did not win the battle of ideas.
Okay.
It did not win the marketplace of ideas because it didn't come up with the idea of the marketplace of ideas.
Okay.
And this was some other people at the time were arguing for a credit theory of money. And that they said that money is not a commodity, but an accounting tool for debts.
Okay.
And a credit theorist, so they said, look, you can't touch a dollar any more than you can touch an inch or a centimeter. Like we have a thing that like accounts for it, but that's not really the dollar. That's a piece of paper. You can't touch a Deutschmark. You can't touch an hour. You can't touch a centimeter. These are abstract units of measurement. And the credit theorists noted that the standardization of abstract units of measurement has always fallen to governments, and therefore that's why the currency did. But the obvious question is, if money is a yardstick, what does it measure? And the answer was simple. It is a unit of debt. Money, a coin, is effectively an IOU. Right?
Oh, okay.
So whereas conventional wisdom holds that a banknote is, or should be, a promise to pay a certain amount of real money, gold, silver, whatever, the credit theorists argued that a banknote is simply the promise to pay something of the same value as an ounce of gold.
Okay.
But that's all the money ever is. There's no fundamental difference in this respect between like a silver dollar, a Susan B. Anthony dollar, made of copper, right? Or a nickel one designed to look vaguely like gold,
right?
Or a green piece of paper with a picture of George Washington on it. It's all just, or a digital blip on a computer in a bank, right? The idea is the same. It's just an IOU,
it's just an IOU of value. It's not even an IOU of something measurable.
Correct. It's like
which blows up the idea that economics can be precise.
Exactly.
A precise science. Okay, I'm following.
Yeah, this is why they're called notes. Bank note. A note, it says it, like, again, language always gives you away. A note is a accounting unit for a debt to be paid.
Okay.
So they're called banknotes. It's like these are just units of they're IOUs, right? So how did this come about? Well, let us make up our own imaginary town to explain this. If they can do it, we can do it. So,
okay.
Let's say that we live in a town and Joshua were to give his shoes to Henry. And rather than Henry owing him a favor, Henry promises him something of equal value in return, and he gives Joshua an IOU. Like a little piece of paper, he says, yeah, I'll give you this much in return. Joshua could wait for Henry to give him something useful, then redeem it. In that case, Henry would rip up the IOU and the story would be over. Mm-hmm. But what if Joshua were to pass the IOU to a third party, like named Kevin?
Okay.
To whom he owes something else.
Mm-hmm.
He could tick it off against his debt to the fourth party, and then Kevin could use it to pay off Lola, and now Henry will owe that amount to Lola. Hence, money, ta-da. Because there's no logical end to this, right?
Right.
You have these IOUs going around and being passed. So if say Lola wanted to now use her money to acquire a pair of shoes from Edith, she would just hand Edith the IOU and assure her that Henry is good for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's in principle, no reason the IOU could not continue circulating around the town, operating as a medium of exchange for years. Henry's IOU could just go around the town. Here you go. Yeah, Henry's good for that. So I'll give you this, and then you give me that, and Henry pay you. Then you hand it, yeah, Henry's good. Now, this all relies on people's faith in Henry.
Right.
Right? This is the central key. So in this sense, currency is the value of unit that currency measures is not the value of an object, but rather the measure of one's trust in the people that for whom is on the stamp of the IOU.
Aha.
Right? That's what it is. And so you can see that then you're like, well, people don't know Henry. Like that may work in a small village, but what if you move to a city? Not everyone knows Henry. And so you give him an IOU. It's Henry's IOU. Yeah, give me a pair of shoes. And like, I don't know who Henry is. Why do I trust that he's going to pay me back?
Yeah.
So you give the IOUs. All the IOUs must flow to the one person everybody knows and has some degree of trust in, the king or the government.
Yep.
That's who they all know. And this is why on your banknotes it says it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. Like the full faith and credit. So, the full faith and credit. The United States, America. It just has that, you can trust it. This is why it runs on trust. And this is why economies break down, not so much from inflation. That's a secondary effect. Not so much but from the breakdown of trust in the government. Oh. When that trust breaks down, because that is what the IOU rides on. When people don't think the IOU is going to be paid, then the currency begins to lose value. Okay. So, like I said, this problem, like no one knows Henry, but what if Henry were Henry VIII? Or Henry II, King of England?
Right.
Now this IOU can circulate a lot more. The IOU, but here's the trick. The IOU can operate as money only as long as Henry never pays it off. It's a bit of a mind twist. The IOU only works by never being paid. If it's ever paid, the game's over.
Right, because then Henry rips up the IOU because he's redeemed it.
Correct. And now no one has anything to circulate. And this is why the conservative idea of money has been wrong, because they've been worried about the debt and like, we got to pay off the debt. What about the debt? If you ever paid off the debt, the money would stop working. Like, I know that sounds weird, but the money works because it is not paid.
Right.
And so this is why everyone has promised to pay off the deficit and no one ever has, because they can't. And oftentimes when they're campaigning on that, they don't know that, but then they get in there, and I'm sure there's some economist that actually knows the deal, and he comes and says, listen, here's the thing. If we pay this off, it stops working. So you're just going to have to tell your supporters something else. Give them a tax break or something. I don't care. But you can't pay this off.
Okay, then by this logic, as long as a government behaves in a trustworthy and reliable way and governs well and generally does right by its people, its money will retain its value no matter how much it prints.
Right. Yeah, and that
there are effects of printing money.
Right. Yeah.
But America hasn't, just because we've been printing. So we've printed a ton of money, and yet the U.S. dollar is still the most used currency in the world.
Correct.
Despite that,
Right.
all economic theory, it's still. But then, at some point, if the U.S. government, if the world stops trusting the U.S. government, trusting in our whatever leadership or
our IOUs, yeah.
then the thing can just blow up overnight. And so maybe the amount printed is secondary to the trust level. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, the amount printed in some respects doesn't do anything. This is why people that have been economists, and they're conservative economists, and they look at Adam Smith's thing and they say, well, this is obviously, if you increase the money supply, you're deflating it, but it never happens.
Yep.
And it doesn't happen because the barter transferred to coinage theory of money is incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what it is. So the base assumption is wrong. Right. And this is, but see, the fulcrum is on this side. The fulcrum is on this thing, and we got to pay, and this is we pay debts, and it's all real, and right. And then that allows the left, but it's not even true. Right. So, and when I said it's like this IOU, this is in fact precisely how the Bank of England was started. It was this first successful modern central bank. In 1694, a consortium of English bankers made a loan of $1.2 million to the king, 1.2 million pounds to the king.
Mm-hmm.
In return, they received a royal monopoly on the issuance of banknotes. So the bankers give 1.2 million pounds to the king. The king gives them a monopoly on the issuance of banknotes. What this meant is that, in practice, is they had the right to advance IOUs for a portion of the money the king now owed them to any inhabitant of the kingdom willing to borrow from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it was basically.
I'm sorry. I said the king. The king loaned the bank, not vice versa. Yeah. So now the banks, the central banks, because the king, they have the IOU of the king. They're allowed to print banknotes that transfer the IOU of the king onto the banknote.
Gotcha.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they now had the ability to give this to the citizenry, and in effect circulate or monetize the newly created royal debt. And this only worked as long as the original loan remained outstanding, and to this day that loan has never been paid. It cannot be paid. If it were paid, the entire monetary system of Great Britain would cease to exist. And this is why they have to have the monarchy, and they can't go away. It has to exist, you see, even in a form where it has no power, because they're the guarantors of the IOU.
Oh, weird.
I know. It's this weird spiritual lock that it's like a metaphysical lock on the money operates, and even we can't get rid of the king, and this is why they will never get rid of the crown, because the crown is the IOU that the pound sterling operates on. And if that goes away, then, and they can't pay it back, right? And the Bank of England kept their own internal records using tally sticks until, even in Adam Smith's time, until 1826, and they said, well, it doesn't really matter if we actually keep a record of what we're doing. It's just the IOU from the king. So they even threw out their whole pretend that it was but still they need that. They have to owe the debt. They don't have to care what the debt is. They have to owe the debt, own the debt of the king, of the monarch.
Right.
Which is why they can't get rid of That's why the British crown is and a lot of the other crowns that still exist in Europe exist for that same reason. Because the currency relies on the IOU from the crown. Even if they don't do anything. They're the guy they're the Henry in town that the whole country trusts to be good for his IOU.
This is super weird.
I know. It's super weird, but that seems to be what it is. And so people trust the United States government, and that's to pay its loans, and that's why the IOU of the United States government. Now they trusted increasingly less,
Right.
and as trust breaks down, so doth the currency, right? But so what I'm saying is we have to meet. We have to move the fulcrum, and one of the ways we move the fulcrum, because so much of the current, what would you say, zeitgeist to attack the West comes from this, because say colonialism, right? Colonialism is a big one they use to attack people with.
Yeah.
Okay, well, is there truth to it? Of course, right? So the colonies were there, and they did bad things. But people will say, but that was that was like 100 years ago or whatever. Like, why does that matter now? Well, okay, so take this example. We'll go back to Madagascar. In 1895, France invaded Madagascar. They got rid of the government of then Queen Ranavalona III and declared the country a French colony. And one of the things they did afterwards is they imposed taxes on the population, in part so they could reimburse the costs of having been invaded, which is what we do, but we just call it, you must buy our bonds. So we invade Germany and Japan, and then we say, now to reimburse us for the privilege of invading you, you must buy our bonds. And used to, they would just say taxes, but now they say, we're so good at redefining things to confuse people.
Right.
But we were doing this same thing we've always been doing. All right. So, and since the French colonies were also supposed to be financially self-supporting, to defray the cost of like railroads and highways and whatever else they were going to build, the taxpayers of Madagascar were never asked if they wanted these railroads, or were they allowed to have much input. Right. And that's where the story, and for the next like half century, the French and army and police strong-armed the people into doing what they wanted and killed them when they revolted and all that. And that's where the story sort of ends in the popular culture. And they said, you did this and it's bad, and it is bad and it was bad, and so now you owe, and then they say, well, and then so the problem is colonialism and white people and you gotta get them and blah, blah, blah. So to do this, but they do this because to this day, Madagascar, in the judgments of the world, still owes the French money for these taxes imposed a while ago.
Really?
Yeah, for these taxes imposed up until the 1950s and later, with compounding interest applied to them, they still, the world's governments, the international community, quote unquote, they don't take up any moral issue with what France did to Madagascar. They only ever get on Madagascar's case for failing to pay these debts to France. And so an easy way for the banks and all these big countries, because they can't like they can't like say, well, we're going to forgive your debts and you can't have any money anymore. They say, oh, it's because white people bad. But see, this system is still continuing, of this debt-based system, which is still pressing people down. The same is true of the Republic of Haiti, right? So they did their revolt. They fought off Napoleon, right? And then after they defeated Napoleon's armies, France insisted the new Republic of Haiti owed it 150 million francs in damages for the expropriated plantations, as well as the expenses of outfitting the failed military expedition, and all other nations, including the United States, agreed to impose an embargo on the country until it was paid. The sum was intentionally impossible, equivalent to $18 billion now, and the resultant embargo ensured that the name Haiti has been a synonym for debt and human misery ever since. But when you bring this up, people are like, well, yeah, but we can't forgive the debt. That can't be the thing we do.
It's obviously colonialism, or
Right.
it's because of white supremacy. You go, but what if you just forgave the third world countries their debt that you keep claiming they owe you every year? Nah. That's not what it is. That's not their problem.
So are Haiti and Madagascar still under effective economic
Madagascar is. I don't know about Haiti, but I believe so.
embargo? Okay.
Yeah, Madagascar. So the powers that be will do every rhetorical contortion imaginable. They'll blame it on racism or Christianity or colonialism or patriarchy, rather than give up the claims, which they still hold, to debt owed by the third world countries previously conquered.
Wow.
So, like, you're still in debt for the taxes we imposed, and you never paid it.
So when a social justice warrior is ranting on about what a dump Haiti is, and it's because of racism, it's they're not even mentioning the idea that Haiti is still in debt to.
Yeah, because
France.
the government never brings that up, because that would look bad. It's very nice to just say, oh yeah, it's because of white supremacy or racism. And then the tangible, actual, like, material attack that they make on these people every year, and then the IMF, the International Monetary Foundation, like, really hurts people over this. Like, they will impose sanctions, they will impose, like, to collect this money. The IMF is the global mafia going around with a baseball bat, breaking the kneecaps of countries which do not pay. And, like, so this is where you meet leftists and you say, yeah, you are right that there is a big problem and that a lot of these third world but here's where you're wrong, that we got to go after the people that are still imposing this debt on these people. Right? Because that's what is holding these people down. In a real material sense. And the great thing about debt is you can make it seem as though it's the victim who's doing something wrong.
Right, because you shouldn't have gotten into a lot of debt, and now you're in a
exactly.
real pickle.
Like, this is your fault.
Yeah.
The banks do that now. They're like, well, look, I know that we made a bunch of lies about how things would work to teenagers, but the fact that they got into $300,000 of unbankruptable student loans is their problem.
Yep.
Right? And it's like, it's so evil because you can use debt to frame it so that the people you're hurting seem like they're the bad guys. And you do this. This is how no small amount of wars have been justified, by the way. Mm-hmm. I mean, almost all of them.
Is owed debt
of some kind, right? Like Madagascar, Bolivia, the Philippines, they still owe money. The world, they're the debtor nations. They've all at one time been like attacked or whatever, and then they impose taxes, and then they say, well, I know you got out of it, but still owe these taxes and this debt, and then has interest on it, see? Mm-hmm. And the interest is compounded, and I know you've paid it back 7 times over, but you still haven't, you're still like 5 times the principal in debt.
And if you don't play along with this scheme and keep ponying up, your country will be embargoed and written out of the global economy, and you won't be able to export or import anything and all that stuff.
Right. And so the debt-based servitude subjected on the third world is heinous.
Or like in Libya, you'll have a regime change operation if you try to buck the system. Which is exactly what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. That was the deal, is that he didn't want to play this game anymore, and they said, okay, yeah, we're gonna reject this whole post-colonial debt structure stuff, and we're gonna start our own economic policy, and we have the oil to do it. And he was dead, within a few months.
Yeah, and he's the bad guy.
Took him out quick, yeah.
And this is what's happening internally in the U.S. also, because the U.S. is a debtor nation that cannot pay its debts. Mm-hmm. And so they feel justified in doing whatever they want to it, because if it helps pay off the debt, the debt has to be paid. And everybody, like the Bible says, he who is a debtor is a slave to the lender. Mm-hmm. And everyone in America just took it as normal that you just went into tremendous debt for your whole life. I mean, mortgage in French means death pledge.
Yeah.
Mortgage. So this is why the banking class, the rich class, has such disdain for the populace of America and other places, is because they view them as a bunch of people that won't pay their debts. They had the mortgage crisis, and they couldn't pay their debts. The losers, it's their problem. I know we manipulated everything and made a bunch of them predatory, but it's their fault, right? And so this is the way I'm saying, you can give the devil his due when the lefties make these attacks and say, yes, but it's actually because of this debt system thing. And then maybe that moves the fulcrum a little bit away and says, hey, it's actually this whole foundation of money and like paying your debts. It's not actually how it works. And we push that over, and then we restore some balance to the system. Because, think about it, it's weird that we have this system, like this idea that debts must be repaid.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not even economically what's supposed to happen. Like a debt is supposed to come with risk that it's not repaid.
And the idea of enforceability of contracts is related to, but not entirely encompassing, the idea that all debts must be repaid. Because some debts imposed are not contractually agreed upon by both parties. Right.
And even if they were, like a debt is supposed to be risky because it comes with some thing that will not be paid back. There's a risk.
Right.
But if the debt can be collected upon regardless, as the IMF seems to think can be done to the Madagascar people, despite the Madagascar people never having agreed to the debt, or student loans, which they didn't know what they were doing, or people that just get in a place where it doesn't make sense for them to do that, then why wouldn't they just give a bunch of bad loans? Which is what they do.
So empire and like the modern economic colonialism that is afflicting people all over the world is the result of the bankers and the money lenders of the world trying to remove all the risk from their racket.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And
all the risk of loss. Yeah.
And usury used to be a mortal sin, supposedly still is, but no one ever preaches about it anymore because all the leverage that they have over them.
Right.
I mean, like, it used to be, people don't realize this, but used to, if you lended money at interest, not excessive interest, they do this, another rhetorical trick. They say usury is loaning money at excessive interest. Like, no, it was any interest.
Yeah.
At all. If you didn't ask, like, you could loan money, but when you got it back, you just got back the exact same thing.
Yep.
No interest. Not even to cover inflation, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Just no interest. And then the people will give you back the same thing you borrowed. But if you did any usury at all, even 1%, it was equivalent to like adultery and murder. Like you were going to hell.
Yeah.
Unless you repented hard. And now we just have our whole system based on usury, and then we're like, what's the problem? Things keep not working. I don't know. What could it be?
Yeah.
What could it be? And then when people rightly got upset about it, like I said in 2008, and they did the Occupy Wall Street thing, people were like, well, just say it's racism. I don't know. Are we going to change anything about how the system works? No. Are we going to keep using the same weird financial tools under different names? Yes. Is it going to happen again? Almost certainly. But it'll be someone else's fault. It's their fault. They're the ones that took the loans. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and one more thing before we finish up on talking about debt and like why it's a problem and what we need to do about it. I think the solution is we need to start putting into the public consciousness the idea of debt jubilee. Like, because people have to loan people money because sometimes that needs to happen.
Yeah.
But it can't be held over them forever. So we need to have a system that occasionally or at certain time periods just forgives the debt. No question, no bankruptcy where it has all this attack and it's tough to get, just forgives the debt. Just, it's over. And you do this between countries too. Like, and today Chile no longer owes us money. Hooray.
Well, apparently God thinks debt jubilee is a pretty good idea because it was in the law given to Moses.
Right. It's a balance because it balances the conservative need. Like you have to, look, pay what you owe and the thing. And like sometimes debts are necessary and that's fine. And you got to fulfill your commitments. But also on the other side, you can't just hold it over people's heads forever.
Yeah.
So you have the debt exists, but also you're obligated to then forgive the debt. Right. So it's both together. And that, I think, moves the fulcrum towards the center where you can then be like, well, we're going to, this is the solution to like colonialism, is to stop asking Libya to continue to pay us money for blowing them up.
Yep.
And imposing sanctions on them if they don't, because that's weird. And no one even talks about. So that's the solution to colonial. And that'll also solve a lot of interpersonal, like family problems. Like you could get back to like one parent working.
Yeah.
And the other parent staying, because there wouldn't be this giant debt. Like no one's in debt all the time and trying to work off. Because debt, as I've said before, is the opposite of sacrifice. It sacrifices you take something good now and you give it up in the hopes of having better in the future. And debt is you sacrifice the future in the hopes of getting something good now.
Yeah.
Right?
Ooh, deep.
And so that's why debt is such a religious term and it occurs in religious texts before it occurs in economic texts because it's the opposite of the sacrifice. Right? And so this is how it all works together. We're going to solve everything. It's going to be fine. This is also why people work stupid jobs like in the office show. Because people, people are paid a salary, right? And that salary is viewed as the payment, like for the debt of time rather than for work.
Let's pause here for a second because we're running up past 2 hours.
Yeah,
so maybe we need to go into a second show about debt and work theory.
Okay, yeah, this is just why we started the show with the because the rise of nonsense jobs that don't need to happen and everyone can just stay home for a year and nothing changes is because it's rooted in this idea of like debt and things owed. Yeah. Which are never forgiven. And this is going to solve everything. This is the maps resolution for Jubilee is here. We're putting it into the consciousness of the public.
Debt Jubilee.
We're raising it to the higher vibrations. We're in the fifth dimension.
Yep.
I'm operating. I have all my chakras open. I know that you do too.
And what a great way to move the fulcrum is to say to all the lefties, yeah, I think your student debt should be forgiven.
Right. Like your debt.
And dude, if there was a debt jubilee every X number of years, what would that do to the housing market where people can't lever themselves for 30 years anymore?
Exactly.
Because the mortgages no one would write a 30-year mortgage that's going to be jubileed in 10.
You might have to make buildings on a human scale that resembled villages like you used to when people lived in common and worked together. Maybe.
Right, and people would actually be able to afford to own homes and people would be allowed to build their own homes because we would have to change the building codes. I mean, the effects of this would be tremendous.
It's the usury is the root of so many problems in today's society. It's unfathomable.
Indeed.
So we just have to cut it out. We have to get rid of it. We have to start treating it like it should be treated.
There you go. I do have a memo before we close out. I have a memo for the audience. Okay. If you guys could refrain from texting me while I'm recording the show to tell me how triggered you are about a topic in the last show.
No, I think they should keep doing that. That would be great.
Just keep texting me while we're recording.
Text him all the time. Text him your personal concern. We need to figure out a way to do this live so that people can text you about how they're angry now.
Well, Two-Stroke is triggered apparently about IPAs, and he's letting me know.
He's wrong. Beer is an Emperor's New Clothes thing. It doesn't taste good.
In your face, Two-Stroke.
Beer isn't good. People are just pretending it's good for me. It's like tea. Tea is just hot water, people. It doesn't taste like anything. You can put all the tea. It's just vaguely hot water. Stop it.
We're closing it. We're closing it. But how about this for a synchronicity?
Yeah.
In the show that we talk about how the foundation of economics is fake, the music that I had already picked out for the outro is Eminence Front by The Who.
Ooh.
It's a put on, man.
See, simulation is running full steam.
Dude, it's like a well-oiled machine. Buy some shirts at mapsock.org. Do it.
That will help end debtors' prisons.
Yeah, if you buy shirts, we won't end up in debtors' prisons.
Yeah,
So,
if you buy a shirt, Madagascar will be free.
Jubilees, baby. Next t-shirt, it's going to be a Debt Jubilee shirt. I can feel it.
Yeah. That'll be the campaign we run on when we run for president. Just everyone's debts forgiven. Be very popular.
When do we file the paperwork for a political party?
We probably get assassinated.
Oh, definitely. 100%.
Thankfully, we have many clones.
That's why none of the left-wing politicians will touch that issue.
Yeah.
They're not touching debt jubilee because they know they're going to get whacked if they do.
Right.
People forget.